Welcome to the third season of Tawagoto Café. Starting with this episode, most texts will have voiceovers for a more listenable experience. This is an opinion piece. The opinions of the hosts and guests are their own, and are not representative of the organizations or institutions they are affiliated with. Due to the circumstances of the recording process, this program should not in itself be taken as a factual source in any manner. This episode was recorded on August 9th, 2023. Several portions of this episode of Tawagoto Café may include outdated information. We advise viewers to consider this a retrospective piece on the state of things at the time. As an additional disclaimer, Seele is a for-hire contract Japanese to English translator and subtitler who has worked on content from Cover Corp, representing Hololive and Holostars. His opinions do not reflect those of the company nor its management in any way. And with that, let's begin the episode.
And speaking of the things that we need to do to maintain VTubers on a corporate scale, we segue to the third.
The third one. And this is... The third one doesn't just apply. The third article, which is the second... the third reference, which is the second article that I wrote on my blog on VTubers. So it's a theory on VTuber presentation. The two veils. So here, I basically try to justify what we call in the Hololive fan server Holofans Rule 8, no doxing or unveiling of past lives of VTubers unless there is explicit presentation of why of them revealing their identities as such. Now, the two veils that I present there, TLDR, because it's a fairly winding article that I won't bother rereading myself. There is the veil of
physicality and one of personality.
Okay, so the veil of personality basically theorizes that VTubing allows you to essentially mask certain parts of yourself that you may find undesirable. Okay, so that's the veil of personality. I will go back to it a bit later. Then there's a veil of physicality, which is probably the more explicit thing, which allows you to mask your physical form altogether, allowing you to stream more comfortably in this virtual space. Now, the veil of physicality I think is still important as a VTubing tool. It's definitely there for people who are not comfortable with showing themselves in the internet, but would like to participate in the streaming space as themselves. Now, I say as themselves here because the veil of personality is, I guess, mixed. I don't remember if I mentioned it in the post, but my current view of the veil of personality now is that sometimes being yourself is best, and that may thin out the veil of personality to the extent where it's practically non-existent. But the veil still exists because you get to choose which part of you want to reveal. For example, you're not gonna if you're a streamer who's not comfortable with outright revealing their nationality or wherever they live for somewhat obvious practical reasons, you could use a veil of personality to just not mention it at all, probably change your accent or something, hide it with various filters, whatever you could do via VTubing, as that you have the creative freedom to be able to do that as a VTuber. Now, what Rule 8 enforces in Holofans, at least in the Hololive fan server, because that's where I moderate as well, and similar VTuber fan servers that uphold a similar rule. My justification, I think, in the article back then was to preserve those two veils under the pretense of kayfabe, but I think there's a viewer side to it that's just as justifiable that I don't think I really touched on in the original article. And it ties back to my excitement for Advent. Since here's the thing, I've been working in the industry behind the scenes as a translator for around 3 years already. Do you know why I was so excited for Advent?
It's because there was a sense that personalities were coming back, in the sense that this reminds me of the days where I used to be excited about content, about Japanese, or not Japanese, because these are English, because Advent is an Hololive English branch.
That's a part of it. That's true. But I already mentioned this just a while ago. I didn't know Advent was coming. I had no idea. Rule
It,
8.
it was simply the novelty that you could partake in the enjoyment to consume the content from the streamers who just debuted without your prior knowledge. Like,
Yes, without
there was
any
no you were once again on the outside.
Yeah, it felt like I was in the outside again. Being in Rule 8, I think, is like Rule 8, we established it as a rule that allows us to essentially think, or rather fool ourselves into thinking that we're protecting the streamer. But as far after like moderating for a few times and realizing that some of our moderators are also human beings, I think I've come to appreciate Rule 8 as well as a way to protect the viewer. Okay, I think I did touch on this in the blog post, but I didn't flesh it out much. So this is the part where I actually flesh it out a little bit more. But Rule 8, the no doxing rule, no past lives mentioning rule, allows the viewer a element of surprise. A element where you know how excited you could be about something that you don't know is gonna happen? Like, you don't know these people, you're going to be seeing them for the very first time, and like the magic sadly goes away the more you are engrossed in the industry. Or as with regards to sometimes in Rule 8, people who try to break Rule 8, these people are more engrossed in the personalities behind the VTuber than the VTubers themselves. Which is, okay, if you want to play that game, sure. But I'm personally a bit more excited when I don't know anything. There's novelty to it. Finally, I could appreciate. Finally, I'm a viewer again, in that sense.
In a sense that being caught up in the workings of the industry, as if it's like, I noticed that there is definitely a pattern of behavior to people who do engage in this kind of thing, in this kind of like expose kind of behavior.
Yeah.
That kind of desire stems from, at least from my perspective of it, the desire to sort of idealize the entirety of a person from the sum total of everything, I guess.
Yeah.
It's the fact that sometimes corporate identity seems to be a bit of a hindrance to authenticness sometimes. As you can, there's definitely a sentiment. There's definitely a sentiment that if you want to be truly authentic, then you must confront everything. Is that kind of like a perspective of what I've seen that kind of thing as? There's also a very how do I say this? Very deep involvement in the struggle of what the person behind the VTuber persona is going through, and emphasizing that.
I sort of sympathize with that viewpoint, but the thing is, VTubing and being a viewer is fundamentally a parasocial relationship. You have to always remember that the streamer is not your friend, and the viewers aren't your friends either, unless they actually are, in which case good luck maintaining distance. But in general, you have to always remember that there is a screen between you and the other, and that distance is what maintains, in a sense, the safety of VTubing. Well, actually, there's an additional layer of safety for VTubing because of the veils that I mentioned, both in the personality and physicality. Now, what train of thought was I going for again? What were you mentioning?
The the distinction between the idea that
Okay. So, as I said, like, you have to separate the two fundamentally, because by taking on the VTubing mantle, the streamer basically has decided to separate the two. You have to respect that boundary. You have to respect that decision. By becoming a VTuber, the streamer has intrinsically set boundaries between them as a person and them as an entertainer. Doxing is for your own benefit and then exposing it to the world kind of disrespect. No, it's not kind of disrespect. It outright disrespects that boundary. It's not a good practice. I maintain that stance even until now. Now, if you casually know the identity of someone who tries to keep something private, and then don't spread it around, keep it to yourself, maybe. Not everyone needs to know. Not everyone wants to know. A lot of people would rather forget sometimes. They'd like to maintain the illusion, or rather, not really the illusion, but the separation between VTuber and person. Because ultimately, that boundary was set by whoever decided that they'd become a VTuber in the first place, whether it be a corporate entity or, more often than not, the streamer themselves. And I think that's important to this day, even in this current era of EN VTubing, where sometimes the lines are a bit blurred. It's all about respect.
How would you say that the lines are blurred when it comes to English-speaking VTubers?
You?
Me?
For
Me
one
as
thing,
Wataru?
you. Yeah. It's we make very little distinction. Well, I would make a very little distinction. I know you.
Mhm.
The thing is, though, is that your viewers don't necessarily know who you are, even though they might know you as both simultaneously as Denryu Rider and Wataru. But the thing is, you have set the boundary that what you do as Denryu Rider doesn't necessarily bleed into what you do as Wataru.
Yes, that is a sentiment that I explicitly laid out during the unveiling stream.
Yeah, and that's part of the kayfabe. That's part of the veils that I've been talking about. It's a veil of personality in a sense, where the persona that you present as Denryu with what you produce as Denryu is not necessarily the persona that you produce as Wataru, even though there will be very huge similarities and overlaps.
And that distinction has been there from the very start, yes.
Yeah, it's a stricter form of an alias, basically. It's a stricter alias that you'd want people to at least respect if you've set those boundaries clearly enough. Now, there are exceptions. Sometimes people would just stream with an avatar and stream as themselves and make no distinction. That's fine. That's the boundaries that they've set. However, if the streamer clearly has no intent of revealing themselves as their physical form or as their some form of their personality that whatever, then you'd have to respect that too. I think ultimately that rule 8 is rather the no doxing rule that I pretty much sort of preach, I guess. I don't really preach it as much as I do anymore. Sometimes I get tired of it, but it's a necessary thing to uphold.
There is no need for a spectacle to be made on speculating what
or probing. You don't need to probe. You don't need to probe. You don't need to speculate on the identity of the VTuber. Just enjoy the VTuber for who they are. I think, like, the thesis of my post there at the very end was like, let VTubers be VTubers. That's on the end of the VTuber. On the end of the viewer, I would say enjoy VTubers for what they are. They're VTubers.
And you put this in bold text.
Yeah.
The paradox of the VTuber ideal. Who they are doesn't matter because we are seeing who they want to become.
Yeah. Or at least it's not really who they want to become these days, but they're showing us
This is
who
me.
who they want to be at that given time. It's a stage.
It's a stage. And this is
Appreciate
my
it.
character. And this is my
Appreciate it.
persona.
If you don't appreciate it, walk out. If
It's
you want,
theater, and theater has been classically represented with masks ever since the general beginnings of classical theater because it is what it is. Your persona is a mask.
yep. And when you're on stage, that's what keeps the audience going.
And it is sometimes the fiction is damaged by the inability of the viewer to separate the reality from the fiction.
That's true. And I think that's also a line being threaded by people who try to perform exposés of all sorts of things. Like, okay, if you're just excuse me, I am dying. Anyway, if you're just baiting for drama, whatever, as long as you respect the identities of the sometimes drama is inevitable, and there are always people who try and drift in that space. But if you're actively pursuing the identities of people who try to keep themselves as anonymous as possible, or at least keeping their personas as separate as possible, then you're not just drama baiting, you're overstepping on a lot of more boundaries than that. It's a messy space.
Because definitely there is a sense that sometimes the exposés just go beyond speculating on things like the past identities of VTubers. It's also the idea that I see floating around on the internet recently that streaming is in and of itself a mental health hazard.
It is.
There is like a weird sense of misguided morality to it. That
To
it
make
seems
people
like,
stop streaming? To make people stop streaming because...
or to maybe expose the corporate forces that keep streamers under poor mental health.
Okay, so there's a huge misconception sometimes with regards to streamers. Here's the thing, at least in Hololive, we don't force people to stream. If you see Korone, for example, doing an 18-hour endurance stream playing Jump King, she wanted to do that. No one's forcing her to do that. Her manager will probably say something like, Korone-san, onegaishimasu, yasumete kudasai, yasumase kudasai. And Korone's like, yada, yada. And then she should keep on playing Jump King. Yeah, it's a streamer to streamer basis, and some people are endurance streamers, some people aren't. I certainly will have dead vocal cords after recording this podcast, but people underestimate the amount of agency that streamers have.
Yeah. That's actually what I was gonna say as well. That people are more resilient than they think.
Yeah, especially in this age.
In this day and age, like drama can be perceived as something physically affecting because that's like the nature of the internet and those who are exposed to it. It can be literally physically affecting to us who read it.
Yeah.
It's weird biology things already at this point, because the brain simply isn't equipped to handle this kind of information being presented to us in such a instantaneous amount of time. And the idea that there seems to be an involvement from the viewer to be invested in their in what they think is a breakdown of streamers' capacities to stream.
It's an unhealthy mindset to have.
It's also very highly parasocial on the side of
okay. I think we're using the word parasocial here. When I say parasocial, it's merely the dynamic that you are engaging in a pseudo-social relationship with whoever you are interacting with, in a sense that there is some sort of social exchange happening, but there's no direct communication between the parties themselves. I would call it
parasocial because there is no interaction.
There is. Wait, what are you talking about?
That people speculating will likely never receive a response from the talent themselves.
Oh, definitely. That's no longer parasocial behavior. That's toxic stalker behavior. I wouldn't classify that as parasocial.
Yeah,
okay.
We should draw the line there. It's not parasocial if there is no actual like relationship.
But there's no relationship being established. There's no hierarchy. There's no interaction, etc. We can't really call that parasocial anymore. At this point, this is obsession. Granted, like, okay, if you do have private fantasies, you're free to have them. Just be careful who you share them with. I'm talking to myself, by the way. I try to keep my halu down. Halu is a general holofans term for meaning being delusional.
Okay, I have not heard that term before. So
yeah, because I don't use it around you. I don't use it around people not from holofans. But there is, it's fine a bit. It's fine to be like, it's fine to daydream. Just don't be obsessed.
I mean, that's how fanfiction happens. It's like there's imagination everywhere.
Yeah, and once again, I must thank Shiori for being so gracious with providing us with a fanfiction tag, so that people who are halu, like myself, have an outlet. Now, granted, not all fanfiction is acceptable. There are boundaries that are going to be set, and there are boundaries that need to be set. Some people will not be comfortable with fanfiction in the first place,
especially because technically making fanfiction of VTubers is technically RPS.
What was RPS?
Or RPS, or real person fiction.
Yeah, it's... Oh, but that's the beauty of VTubing, to be honest. That's also one of the... Like, okay, you can set your boundaries, but if the VTuber in particular is comfortable with it, or if not the VTuber, like the group of VTubers in particular are comfortable with it, you could totally have VTuber fanfiction.
Because there is a separation. There is a separation. And that's one of the beauties to come out of the interaction that I only have realized thanks to Shiori Novella. Which leads us into our segue to our next segment. It's clear where my stance lies with regards to Advent, but you have a bias already, basically.
I already have an Oshi, unfortunately. After all these years,
it's interesting to see Seele having an actual Oshi again.
It's been so long. It's been so long, man. Anyway, so
our fourth section.
We go into our fourth section, and I keep on mentioning Shiori all the time, but Shiori's relevance here in particular is not just because of my fanboying, but because of her very first non-debut stream.
This is a very measured choice. I actually was surprised that this would be a thing that she would do. Because I mean, you kept me plugged in behind the scenes for news regarding Shiori Novella's upcoming stream schedule.
Yeah, and like I was fairly excited for this stream because, well, I was already planning this podcast, and then she comes in completely unexpected.
Wait, so this was already a thing? You wanted to do this even before she did the
definitely. I was already thinking that, okay, this is probably a timely time to revisit the old VTubers, and then Shiori comes along and she decides, like, I'm going to do a VTuber text stream, and like, holy shit.
There were things in there that even you didn't know.
That's exciting part of. Okay, so all the doom and gloom of Rule 8 aside, let's go from rock bottom all the way back up. So, what's your takeaway on Shiori's VTuber tech stream?
I was not expecting it to be a tech stream at all because you sort of made me watch it, although because I knew I was going to have to prepare for this stream.
Okay. Let's cut out Shiori's rambling after 45 minutes.
Let's only focus on the actual history.
On the actual meat. So what did you think?
It was interesting to see somebody approaching VTuber history from a technological perspective instead of a personality-based perspective. He did briefly touch on Kizuna AI and the original first Tenno members, but that's it. That's all there was. Everything else was a reflection of the evolution of the VTuber space, purely from how the technology that enabled VTubing developed.
Yeah. Do you know what was the most surprising thing about that for me was, even though I should have noticed it all this entire time, the fact that VTubing started 3D, not 2D.
Yeah, 3D was the first.
3D was the first, and it was like, she knew that was weird, and I knew that was weird in a sense, but I didn't really think about it that much, even back then. I think in did we point that out in Tawagoto 3?
No. The thing that it was something of a bit of a, how do I say this? It was a bit of a how do I say this? It's something that I internalized in general while I was basically contemplating the technology that allows Wataru Denryu to exist. Is that essentially what live 2D cubism is, which is what the normal Wataru avatar is built on, is a software that allows 3D models, not 3D models, 2D images to behave as if they were 3D models.
Yes.
And that was an innovation that was necessary because people needed to do that, because it was the entirety of the industry before then was either mocap or you had to translate 3D models through a 2D space using something like OpenCFace or something like that.
Yeah, and I didn't even know some of the technologies that you mentioned in the first place because I was never in that part of the back end.
Yeah,
like perception neuron, etc.
I did not know what perception neuron either.
I didn't know what that was either before googling stuff. And I came in the era where, okay, Kizuna AI, was she mocap? Do you think she was mocap?
We can fact check. We can have future Denryu fact check this.
We can have future Denryu fact check that.
Hello, this is future Denryu here for the fact-checking corner of this episode. While some details regarding the specifics of how the virtual talent Kizuna AI have not been openly disclosed, there are things that are known for certain, such as in how the early days of the channel, the basis of Kizuna AI's character is a 3D model that utilizes the software called Miku Miku Dance, or MMD for short. The generally understood process as to how videos on the Kizuna AI channel were made during this time involve a multiple-step process. First, character modelers create 3D models of Kizuna AI's character using MMD. Then, character animators create motion footage using this character model. In other words, the motion of the character model is animated first. Afterwards, a voice actor dubs over the previously made 3D animation footage. While much speculation was made on the subject of the identity of this voice actor or whether there were multiple voice actors involved, the publicly known voice actor for Kizuna AI is voice actress Nozomi Kasuga. Lastly, video editors processed the animation footage and dubbed audio and dialogue tracks and prepared them for upload to YouTube. As technology for face rigging and motion capture improved over time, we can assume that at some point during Kizuna AI's career, these technologies were eventually implemented into the overall process. And this has been the fact-checking corner, and now we return to the episode.
I'm not too sure what tech Kizuna AI used, and then
because at the time it was secret. It was a trade secret.
It was trade secrets back then. Unlike now, where we know that cover is being sponsored by Sony Mokopi. So,
is that something you can disclose?
Yes, because it's public. It's public knowledge.
It was what did Sony publish a press statement about it?
There's a press statement regarding Mokopi and cover. So we know that that we are partially developing on Mokopi technology.
Wait,
now.
Wait, what do you mean? On the side of like, was Holo Talent used to develop Mokopi technology?
I don't know the details, but we have some involvement either in development or implementation.
So basically, what we're speculating right now is that Cover has had a hand with a partnership with Sony in order for their Mokopi technology to be brought out more into the world.
Yeah. You can fact check me on that, by the way.
Okay.
I remember that.
I'll have future Denryu fact check it for sure.
I remember that. So the tech back then was mostly on the 3D side, which is quite weird, but at the same time sort of expected as well, simply because 3D was weirdly way more accessible than 2D. And then Shiori then outlines that one of the main reasons as well why live 2D was not as widely implemented in the early days was simply because there were no artists doing them.
Yeah, there were simply no resources back then. The entire process of even making these rigs was not standardized. It's not even standardized. Not even, this was a field that most artists didn't get to, because artists and riggers were different skill sets.
So it's really weird to contextualize it that way, especially since I personally don't remember when the transition was from 3D to 2D. Maybe the Tsukinomito era, maybe the Incho era was the transition back in Niji. Because I remember back then, even Holo was still using 3D models for,
because
like,
the very first Sora model was 3D.
Yeah, like Sora was 3D, Miko was 3D, Roboko was also 3D.
Yeah, everybody in Gen Zero was 3D.
Yeah, and they remain 3D to this day. So early tech back then was definitely 3D, but then we started slowly transitioning into 2D once we got to Gen 1, Fubuki era, at least in Holo, and then like Tsukinomito, Deron in Nijisanji.
The very first wave of Nijisanji streamers were definitely live 2D technology.
Yeah, so it's like
there was also we can talk about things like, hold on, let me look this up right now.
Okay, sure.
Because I don't know what the actual name of this is. Because apparently this article even says the technology developed by Reality, which was the subsidiary in the Japanese internet company Gree. Okay, so apparently according to this article, it says that Holo and Niji both used their technology.
Yeah, initially at least, before we started developing our own in-house tech separately.
So it was this and like whatever Entum brought to the table.
Yeah. But as far as I remember, Entum was also like dabbling mostly on 3D because of Mirai Akari, right?
Mirai Akari was basically their flagship VTuber.
Yeah, and she was pretty much like 3D as well. So really,
the company developing Himehina is probably also primarily focused on them doing 3D assets from the start, I think.
The Tanaka company, I forgot what kind of company the Tanakas were, but they have big money. They could fund their 3D. But actually, here's an interesting point as well. So while I was watching Shiori's stream, it was weird to think of VTubing as having started in 3D, but 3D as well in the live streaming, or probably in the VTubing concept, is inaccessible to the average VTuber.
It was a time when the technical knowledge required to even do something like this was limited to only large enough corporate entities or dedicated enough small groups. And somebody, at least one person who needed professional experience and or professional funding. Because this hardware, the hardware component of it, is definitely not something just anybody could buy. It's a prosumer market at best.
Yeah. Would you say that the emergence of Live 2D democratized VTubing?
Once the industry started seeing the demand and more people rose up to the challenge of providing services to, one, customize artwork to be able to be specialty made to be optimized to rig in Live 2D Cubism. And also the existence of platforms like Reality or Pixelveroid, which enabled users to basically customize their own avatar from their phone screen and then immediately start streaming as that. The app called Reality actually, here's the thing. Niji Sanji, the app
Used it. Yeah.
The app version of the whole Niji Sanji concept was that you could create your avatar and then you can start streaming immediately as that.
Yeah. That was pretty much right. I did mention that before, I think, as a sort of democratization of VTubers. Sort of. That makes sense.
Which kind of, I think at some point, and I'm not sure if that's correct. I want future Denryu to fact check me on this. Because I think at one point the handle for Niji Sanji, the company, was Nijisanji_app.
I think so, yeah.
Because first and foremost, they were an app development company.
I don't think you need to fact check that. If my memory serves me right, and in this case, I'm pretty sure it serves me right.
Ichikara at the time was an app development company.
Yeah, just like Cover, to be honest. Cover was a tech company back then. Cover's still a tech company now. Just have a entertainment leg.
Mm-hmm.
It also got me thinking, like this tangent also got me thinking about, okay, so what about people in VR chat?
VR chat was a relatively, it's older than people might realize, I think. But the idea that the technical know-how also increased for VR chat, I think. Once, the one thing that probably, I think, blew open VR chat apparently first released in 2014.
That was a long time ago.
And so what I think what must have happened is, and this is definitely speculation coming on from my part because I'm just like trying to put the pieces together in my head, is that two things happened. The development of the development of software that allowed you to puppeteer yourself a 3D model in a 2D space.
As Shiori puts it, marionettes.
The marionetting. And the most notable of all of those software, because there's a bunch of these software. I'll probably just put up a bunch of those examples on screen right now because there's a lot.
Yeah.
But the most notable out of all of them is OpenCFace, or VCFace. Because that's what eventually a lot of people used.
Inui uses it, right?
Inui?
Yeah. Our Inui.
Inui. Okay,
Our
so
group's Inui.
that's actually going to the second part of what I was going to say.
Okay.
Because the first part is there is the software that allows you to marionette 3D models. The second bit is the engine that makes the 3D models themselves in the first place, Unity.
Oh, right. Okay.
As the Unity platform started developing, and I know there's a lot of ways you can make 3D models, but by and large, I think Unity has a pretty big market share in terms of.
That's why Shiori also loves Unity, because it's flexibility in a sense.
It is, I think, the most accessible of all of the game development adjacent platforms these days. And it's honestly, from what I can tell, because of my circle has a few people in it that literally do FBX edits. I actually am in talks with one of those people to eventually possibly start laying down the ground for an eventuality that
Wataru
Wataru
3D.
Denryu could be rendered in 3D. That's a
Ren-
limitation of time and money right now, but
Yeah.
we've already discussed the idea that it was eventually going to happen.
It's there.
It's there. So the idea that you can take assets from Unity or from VRChat or whatever, and then just as long as you have access to an FBX file, or in the old days it would have been an MMD file, which would then needed to be converted to an FBX file because technology these days.
Yeah.
And to somebody with sufficient enough experience in 3D modeling, and that those kinds of people are definitely showing up as their own specialized people with experience that is able to serve people who need them. So that's definitely a service that people do now. You can see that the democratization of 3D content, especially the 3D models being used as the vehicle for personal expression, especially, is increasing.
Would you say it's adjacent to VTubing, or is it a thing of its own, though?
I have to disclose something.
Okay.
I have to disclose something because of the nature of the people that I interact with on the internet.
Okay.
And this is somewhat of a
Touchy subject?
not really touchy subject. It's more of attitudes towards it are changing, hopefully.
Okay.
And that is the idea that a lot of the innovation put forward by in terms of like the exploration of using 3D models to express yourself has been something that I've been fully seeing in the furry community. Because in a lot of sense,
Wait, let me interject a bit. It's probably cheaper than a fursuit.
most tools designed to produce VTuber avatars are not necessarily optimized for non-human shapes.
Oh, definitely, because you need a different skill set as well in order to rig it properly.
And I'm sure that there were definitely like quote unquote non-human VTubers even in like in the proper not proper even in the more mainstream sphere.
Yeah.
Even like in like Nichisari because Debbie is a thing.
Debbie.
But there's also definitely things in the people in the indie side of things that definitely have made themselves more known because they have a lot of non-human features. That's a very important bit of character building, I guess.
Yeah.
But the democratization of, especially because there's a lot of overlap that I see between furries and people because when they gather together, they eventually get to somewhere where they in their friend group they know at least somebody who knows how knows their way around 3D models. And I know that I feel like I'm incriminating myself by saying such thing, but honestly I think
It's a thing.
it's a thing. It's like objectively a thing. I'm
There's no value judgment to be passed here. To be
yeah,
honest.
this is just an observation that I'm making. Right?
Yeah.
That because I've been in VTube spaces, especially locally, where just being associated around furries will instantly get you shamed or even kicked out of the circle.
I mean, it's the common stigma.
And I've been on the receiving end of that kind of behavior before, despite not being a furry streamer myself, even though I associate myself sometimes with people who are.
Yeah, we have friends in the space. And it's kind of sad that there is a sort of rejection as well.
But that's besides the point. I think what this entire tangent has been saying is that the idea of streaming yourself as a 3D model these days, I see in two particular places.
Okay.
One is if you're a sufficiently developed corporate VTuber.
Or a indie that has money.
An indie that has money. And the idea, so there's a transition, right? From 3D models being shown in a 2D space, being presented in a 2D space, to 2D images that look like they're 3D images, to 3D models again but the idea is that you can now see them moving outside. There's an additional axis now. There is the third dimension, that the dimensionality to basically seeing your model move around in all the dimensions.
There is a caveat to that, though. It depends on your streaming style. Because an observation that I have with regards to sometimes when Hololive VTubers use their home 3D setups, it's basically a slightly no different from how they use their live 2D setups, except they're 3D instead of 2D.
So it's usually the idea that most people see 3D models or 3D streams in the context of either a variety show
or a studio setup.
Basically, a studio setup would be required because people just don't do normally do casual 3D streams. Except when the game that you're playing requires that you be in one.
Yeah.
And that kind of like community sharing is, again, I'm going back to discussing furry streamers, is a very important way of socializing. Because VR chat specifically, because you talked about VR chat streams are very common in those areas.
So in a sense, okay, I'm more familiar with the 2D side of things, but what you're saying is that there is a 3D side which I'm not privy to at all, that essentially coexists right now with the 2D space.
Yes.
It's just as thriving as well, in a sense. Would you call it thriving?
It's even more niche than regular VTubing is.
It's niche, but it's there to stay. Is the 3D VR space a important part of modern furry communities?
It is in the absence of, because it's only these days that well, I've heard from a lot of friends who do, because furry conventions have been a thing.
Yeah.
And those people get around to meeting each other, and there's a lot of socialization that happens in those spaces. And outside of being able to meet people
physically,
there's the VR space. And the VR space is interesting because it's not necessarily a space where content is being made. It is simply a means to just be yourself. Well, sort of, because the idea is that your furry persona is you. So that's another. I feel like that's another stream in and of itself, because like it's.
I think we can discuss on another stream the social aspects of,
because I think we need Goro to be here for that.
Yeah, and I think I'd also want to discuss for that particular stream the social aspects of VTubing, because VTubing these days is so prevalent that you could build entire communities of VTubers who are not even part of an agency. And I think that's worth discussing, but for some other time. For now, we are slowly taking steps from the past to the future, and finally, we talk about tech. We meandered about tech. We talk about all the stuff that's possibly happening in the virtual space. Let's go outside, touch grass a bit, and go to the final section. The people who touch the grass, people like Accented Cinema. You watched Accented Cinema's take on the philosophy of VTubers, right?
Yeah, it is a. From what I remember of it, it is.
What do you think?
It is a.
You called it a sincere, ironic love letter to. Well, not really a love letter.
A sincere love letter to VTubing wrapped in internet irony that is expected of that kind of thing.
I mean, okay, let's get this thing straight. I really like Accented Cinema. as a YouTube channel. I watch it a lot. It's my main source of Asian cinema education, even though there might be better sources out there. Nonetheless, I really look up to him. So when I saw his video on the philosophy of VTubers, I initially thought he was just gonna be a bit dismissive about it because it's an April Fool's video and all. He wasn't. He knew that it's the central thing that you'd want to see when you watch a VTuber is kayfabe. Rather, you want to be part of the community that thinks that VTuber is who they are, including the VTuber themselves. Wasn't that the gist of what Yang Zhang was saying?
It is a living theater.
It's a living theater. I very much agree. Seeing Yang Zhang come to pretty much similar or the same conclusions about how the VTubing industry is and probably should be, as I did several years back, even as I was already immersed in the industry. It's a bit of validation, really. At least for me, personally. To have like what I consider a established media critic that I pretty much watch say the same things that I've been saying throughout all of these years.
In that also, it's also a validation of the new media itself, because
yeah,
around the time I think there was a point probably in the English speaking sphere that
people were confused about VTubers.
Yes, and it couldn't shake the image. They couldn't shake the image away from a perceived association with certain stereotypes that are present about people who consume anime adjacent things.
Yeah.
And an especially cynical take would have been that VTubers are basically a device that's meant to quote-unquote prey on people's mental instabilities to extort money from them. Like that's like a common but also very incredibly misguided take.
Yeah.
At the time.
I mean, I guess you could make the same argument for basically any sort of streamer, but
mostly because I think it was around the time that English-speaking VTubers started appearing on Twitch specifically.
Oh,
and there was definitely a pushback because at the time, Twitch as a platform seemingly started being seen as, how do I say this? Because honestly, the core sentiment of it is pretty misogynistic. It's a lot of it is definitely undue hate towards women.
Would you call it chauvinistic?
There actually was in fact probably that kind of element to it, because it's like, oh hey, it's only X female streamer who gets attention, or X kind of content is the only thing that's popular on Twitch.
I'd call it misogynism, to be honest. Like, that's me.
And especially around the time when this was around the time that V-shoujo started becoming really popular.
All right.
And they couldn't shake off their initial unsavory reputation, I would say.
I mean, understandable given that they decided to take in Melody, and Melody's arguably way more wholesome than she first appeared to be.
Mm-hmm. It's honestly, looking back on that kind of panic at the time,
yeah,
it was just that, a panic. It was existing stigmas magnified on that kind of stage, repeated rehashed arguments against similar content from not VTuber streamers who were basically accused of the same thing. It's the same dance repeated again because it's time. It's just the anime girls that the people were mad at.
Yeah. Although, well, if you're looking in from the outside, especially from outside the more Japanese media consumer-oriented spaces, VTubers are pretty weird.
And especially because like there's definitely stigma against anything resembling Japanese things.
Yeah, although I think in this case, sometimes you'd also make the argument that some people just find streaming itself pretty weird.
Okay, that is also fair because that also was a thing.
That's also a thing, and in general, streaming is niche. VTubers are even more a niche subset. So overall, it's not like you're gonna win everybody, but VTubing has, for better or worse, become a thing, and it's going to stay a thing.
But VTubers did not succeed because they wanted to make it palatable for everybody. They succeeded on the merit. VTubing as a whole, it succeeded on the merits of delivering a personalized thing. How to say this? It for whoever it hits very well.
Yes.
And that's its biggest strength.
Yeah. Like, if it works for you, and it will work for some people, it will not work for everybody, but it will work for a very good group of people. And if it works, it sticks, and you appreciate it. It's an art form in itself. Just as streaming is, in some ways, also an art form in itself.
When Twitch itself started,
yeah,
it's definitely, how to say this? Twitch itself came about because at the time when it was first launched, the hot thing was live streaming.
Oh, really?
Or this basic, or how to say this? Live streaming and vlogging. The concept of the video blog itself was the start. It started becoming a thing on the internet.
I thought the impetus for Twitch was video game streaming.
No. This is before Twitch. Before Twitch, video blogging started becoming a thing.
Yes,
YouTube and the progenitor of Twitch, Justin TV, was created as a response to so it was vlogging on YouTube, and then on Justin TV it was people streaming literally how they go about their daily lives.
Yeah.
And then as a subset of that, people started streaming video games. And that took over the majority of the, because it started becoming a thing because people bonded over the social aspect of watching video games. And soon it became the company. Twitch became the thing. And that's mostly speaking for the English side, the English speaking side of things. Because I don't really know the history of how Game Jikyo, the genre
Let's Plays.
of basically Let's Plays. Yeah, the English equivalent would be Let's Plays. Started because Nico Nico Doga wasn't a live sharing website. It was basically the Japanese analog to YouTube. But socialization still happened on it because of the dynamic comment board. So from there, once YouTube started introducing live streaming features to the audience who did use it, there might have definitely been a reason why YouTube is the preferred streaming service for Japanese streamers.
I think it's beyond the scope here. Yeah. Since simply put, I don't know why as well.
Yeah, because I legitimately don't know.
I can't draw my own conclusions as well, considering that I personally really never bothered looking at streamers until VTubers came along. And I think that was, as a personal experience, that was a pretty big draw. Because I personally did not care for people streaming. And that was like a whatever for me. I didn't really think of that I had time to catch up to people's streams until the novelty of having an avatar being slapped on the screen instead of a person's face came about with what is essentially modern VTubing. So I think that is a good draw to think about. Looking from the outside in, sometimes you just don't want to see a human being there, but you want to see a semblance of a personality given physical form. And a VTuber, or even a PNG tuber sometimes, is sufficient for that sort of purpose.
It's interesting because my perspective on this is definitely not. Because it didn't come from streaming. It came from the very old days of the Let's Play.
Yeah.
Around the early mid 2010s, the first Let's Plays I ever watched were JRPG content. They were delivered by people, and back then Let's Plays had the instructional tone to them almost. Let's Plays were commonly
because they were basically demos, tutorials, right?
Yeah, because they would tell you where to go.
Yeah.
These are mostly generally people who
game guides
who already played the game, and then they're just like it's more of a kaisetsu thing more than anything.
They're guiding you along.
A guide. And then came the 2010s, the mid 2010s, where the explosion of the Let's Play genre in the YouTube space, in the English-speaking sphere, became such a thing.
Yep.
There's a bunch of names that you could cite for this, because they all came up all about the same time anyway.
Yep.
But the idea that people could sit in a couch and record themselves playing video games, and the content is not just the game itself, but the interaction that happens between the people playing the game and it turned into an interesting media form.
Yes, definitely. Because at that point, you are not just streaming the game, you're adding content by streaming yourself, or rather by taking a video of yourself playing, reacting to the game. That's low-key transformative.
Yeah, but here's the thing, most Let's Plays at the time didn't even show the likenesses of the people playing them.
Oh. But they had the voices.
It's only voices. Even the most popular Let's Players at the time, they did eventually show their faces, but that's more because so that people would know what they look like. But
yeah,
in the playthroughs themselves, they would never show them.
They present themselves not as the focus, but they're just a player.
They're just a player.
But the voice of the person being overlaid on the video provides so much additional content and context for the player playing the game, which is, well, transformative.
And an analog in the Japanese-speaking space, I would argue, is the Yukuri Jikyo.
Yeah, the Yukuri Jikyo as well adds significant content, even if it's just going to be like a dry guide in itself.
Yeah, it's a pretty dry text-to-speech voice because most people wouldn't be comfortable using the real voice. But the idea is that it's a voice. There is an authorial voice being added to Yukuri Jikyo videos.
Yeah.
It provides it's a content and then an extra layer of content.
Yep.
So evolving from there is the idea that, okay, we can pre-make this kind of content, but what if we could do it in real time? Then that's, I think, when the innovation of streaming happened.
And I think streaming was also like a technological leap.
Mm-hmm.
Simply because we finally had the bandwidth to not just upload videos, but to stream them in real time.
Just the difference, I don't exactly know what the threshold is between this being a casual activity to entire industries and MCNs being formed around the concepts of people playing video games on the internet.
Or not even playing video games anymore, just making content in general.
At some point,
we just transitioned.
We just transitioned because people started giving money to them. But
yeah,
maybe there was a monetization platform before. Because I think the earliest example of it was like YouTube AdSense, I guess.
Yeah.
And then once people saw that there was an opportunity to make this into a real business, I think that's when the paradigms of MCNs, the congregates, the sponsorships started happening.
The agencies.
because these are people who saw the potential of content creators. I kind of feel dirty about saying that word because it kind of reduces people to just the content they make. But
it's a title in itself. It's an inevitability, in my opinion.
But that's it. But I digress. Once people started seeing the potential in this, it turned into a corporate affair. And then these days, the surge of the independently funded production became a thing. Like it's a trend. So first, it was corporations or groups sponsoring, financially compensating streamers. The second step was the platform financially supporting streamers. It's either YouTube or Twitch or some other platform. The third step is viewers supporting creators. This is where all of the channel, technically the channel memberships are platform, but here are your Patreons, your ganks, your Ko-fis, your all of those initiatives that sprung about in the last few years because of a need by the community to assert their independence over the way the money that they send to the creator is being used. Because there's have definitely been some disagreements about things like how much YouTube or Twitch takes from the individual donation or subscription or that kind of amount, especially in Twitch. That has been a very hot button topic on Twitch specifically these days, because a lot of people see the huge, especially because a huge company bought Twitch.
Yeah, Amazon, right?
Because Amazon bought Twitch. And since then, the perception of people with regards to the way Amazon has been running things has been like really, I wouldn't say polarizing. It was very much, it was heaped, the criticism was heaped upon it very much. Especially because there was a sentiment that you shouldn't be giving money to Amazon. So, well, not just because of Amazon being Amazon, but also, can we express such outright anti-corporate stances here?
I cannot. You can.
Either way, I might eventually cut this because to be fair, this is kind of a tangent as well as what I was going to say.
Future Denryu says we are absolutely not cutting that out.
Let me rewind a bit. These days, people prefer to support their creators they watch using different means, which is usually service that the creator themselves sets up. Sometimes it's a direct line of donation. Sometimes it's a service. But there are basically lots of ways this could go around these days. Like, in general, we can think about VTubing as being, especially in the terms of like the big corporate entities like Cover or Enikala, as being driven by the almighty super chat and channel memberships, because that's a new thing. But also in the indie space, you can see that creators have been supporting themselves using platforms that are not necessarily the ones the platform gives you.
Yeah, because sometimes you're not necessarily getting as much as you want on the platform that you're streaming on. Therefore, you would resort to other, possibly more lucrative areas where you would want to get monetization from.
And it is within a streamer's right to choose what kind of service they want to use to monetize their content.
Pretty much.
Okay.
How did we get here from talking about the philosophy of VTubers?
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Okay. The philosophy of VTubers. We tangented pretty hard then.
You tangented pretty hard. I let you tangent.
Okay. What was the thought that made me? Because I was narrating the history of streaming.
Yes.
What was it saying before then? Because what made me tangent towards the history of streaming?
I don't know.
Okay, so let's go about your let's go about the video again, because we can just take something from there. What were the specifics about the things that Accepted Cinema discussed in their video?
Accepted Cinema pretty much focused a lot on the, like, he was trying to make sense of why VTubing is, until he realized it was kayfabe, and then it made sense to him because he likes wrestling and all. So it all clicked only when he realized that VTubing is what it is simply because people act out as if it is a thing. Get my drift?
Okay, so
that's basically the thesis of the video, as far as I remember. When did I last watch the thing?
Whatever you present to the audience is.
Yes. So it's like I'd want to close on that note, like this entire thing, because it comes a bit full circle, at least from my perspective of things. Is I started out being absorbed in the kayfabe with Kizuna AI, actually thinking that she was an AI, and then analyzing my own conclusions, going back why I like VTubers so much and why the no docs rule had to be upheld because of the entire kayfabe thing and the maintaining of the veils. And then it all just comes back to the fact that sometimes you just want to watch someone on screen be a character. It doesn't matter what they're doing. Sometimes you just want to watch them as that. And I think that's pretty much the magic of VTubers as a viewer. From a production standpoint, it's pretty much like the streamer can act out who they want to be, but then you as the viewer can pretty much just enjoy who you want to see.
It's interesting.
Ultimately, I think VTubing can be healthy. Can be. It's probably gonna be as healthy as any other streaming medium there is, but the level of distance and the level of creativity that you're allowed is something that I think needs to be stated. There's a lot of freedom of expression in VTubing that sometimes you probably won't be able to get via other means.
And it's something we take for granted these days, actually.
It's something we take for granted these days.
To see what kind of persons we were 3 years ago versus now, it's that. But both of these instances, the story that began Tawagoto Café, in both cases, now and then, we were excited about VTubers.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see the continuation of that story, because we went through a lot in the years that followed the first season.
Yeah.
But we found ourselves back in this place of being excited about VTubers again, even though we're completely somewhere else now.
Yeah, we're completely. It's good to be back, even if even if it's not the same anymore.
And we're excited about VTubers for different reasons this time around.
Yes.
Whereas back then, we saw it as being like, oh yeah, this is gonna be like the next big thing.
Yeah.
In the entertainment industry,
yeah, we were hyping it up unreasonably, but understandably so.
But the thing is, it did become the next big thing.
It did become the next big thing.
And
probably
then what?
Too big for some people.
We're living in the consequences of the bubble.
Yeah.
Which probably has popped already several times.
It has popped several times. The market is oversaturated. You have drama here and there, and yet where we are now.
And yet we found ourselves in a place where we didn't change our fundamental view of what VTubing could be.
Yeah.
Which is purely the idea that there is a possibility in a character, a persona.
It's entertainment, not in its purest form, not as an ideal. It's entertainment.
We're not romanticizing it or anything, because there's like,
Yeah.
because honestly, like making entertainment out of being yourself is kind of, it's a tall order.
It's a tall order, but at the same time, VTubing allows you to do it. It allows you to do it in a way that lets you see a different side of yourself. It made you do improv.
Well, me doing improv had only partially.
It's only tangential to it, but
It did
yeah.
made me want to continue.
Yeah. And I think we've come full circle to thinking that VTubing is going to be like this huge bubble, to being in our own bubble of being satisfied with what VTubing has become.
We've completed like a cycle of being optimistic, then the crashing down, the realization that not everything is like the way it is. Like the realization that there is darkness in everything.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, it's like it's the idea that we are making humans out of abstractions is such a powerful concept.
In a sense, but I don't really. Well, how do you explain that?
We are expressing our humanity in ways that sometimes don't involve human personas necessarily.
Well, that's
Virtual, I'm sorry, human, and by human I mean like our flesh and blood personas.
Okay.
By characters that we express on a virtual space.
For me, I think that divorcing myself from the entire corporate side of things, because I am very much embroiled in the corporate side of things, rather my view has been warped on the corporate side of things. I think for me, VTubers are just a, like, in an ideal world, VTubers would be a fairly safe form of expression. Of course, things are not ideal, and I'm very sure that even after we record this, there will be way more challenges up ahead for any VTuber, for any viewer, for any consumer of media out there. Things are not going to get any easier. But, well, enjoy the show. I'll enjoy the show.
The ride is not perfect. It is very bumpy. It is very much plagued with the same kind of human problems that are present in any form of entertainment, really. Enjoying entertainment these days feels like it has an additional expectation on top of it.
True.
Because the awareness of, and I don't want to go into like morality related things here because I don't think that's what I want to say.
I don't think it's a moral argument, to be honest.
Because it's like being conscious of the things you're like, the internet has made us more aware of the consequences of making up a fake persona of yourself online.
That's true.
And that's not necessarily it's not a blanket good bad thing. It's basically because honestly the pros and cons are the same. It's the fact that a human is behind the creation of that kind of thing. We are limited in the end by our own humanity.
That's true. No matter how many masks you attach, sometimes you're always just gonna be you. And that's fine, to be honest. So, if you're gonna be VTubing, make sure you stay safe, make sure you enjoy what you're doing, and if you don't, there are those days.
I kind of want to ask a bit of an abstract question, and
Okay.
I kind of want to know what your answer to it is.
Okay.
If you look at yourself in the mirror and see somebody else, is that still you?
I mean, how would I recognize it as somebody else? Tomato in the mirror argument?
Maybe I haven't read enough Japanese VNs to be eloquently philosophical about such sorts of thing. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that no matter what kind of mask you choose to wear, I guess you're still you.
Yeah, because you chose to wear that mask.
Wait, why did we get so? That's my consequence. If you let me talk for too long about such kinds of things, I would start saying things like this.
It's fine. Ultimately, you could extend this to like the philosophy of VTubers in itself. Like Yang Zhang was all about the kayfabe, but you could have gone deeper. You could have gone deeper, but that would be just rambling already, and you would probably need something like Greek. You know, you need someone with an actual philosophy degree, specializing in media representation, blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
but
okay.
Unfortunately, I'm just a translator, and you're just a VTuber.
And I'm just a person with a day job that does VTubing on the side.
Yeah. Ultimately,
And honestly, there's not really that much big thought about why I even chose to be this specific VTuber character. There's not much like. There is no grand aspiration behind wanting to be Wataru Denryu. There is no, like, I don't consider my OC to be an ideal of what I want to be. It's just how I choose to express myself on the internet, and I think a lot of female personalities think the same way. It's not that. It's nice to be able to represent yourself in a form that you want to do it with, but the underlying aspiration is only as big as you yourself, the Nakanohito, the human behind the character, is willing to do. How much do you want it? How much do you want to become a star?
sometimes you don't need to be a star. You just want to express yourself however you can.
How do you choose to express yourself to the public?
Or not even the public, really.
Because you can do VTubing in private, I guess. I
Yeah.
guess. Even if your audience is literally just a friend that you made in some other overseas country over Discord.
Yeah. So, what's our thesis for this? Because I'm pretty sure we are dying.
And I think we should really be wrapping up about this now.
Yeah. So, our main thesis for today is VTubers are.
VTubers are ?
Let us know in the comments. See? I know how to do videos now. Eh?
VTubers are what?
Yeah, I already mentioned it. VTubers are. Mention it in the comments if you have an answer. What is VTubing to you? Yes, we are now doing audience engagement. We are trying to do audience engagement. Please watch our video.
And you called me out over saying basically channel Torok Onegaishimasen the first time we did this.
Oh, I'm not going to say channel Toroko. I just want people to comment. I don't really care if we have subscribers.
It doesn't really. Yeah, it's our engagement is sometimes not even in the YouTube comments. It's like people from in your social media space.
Yeah.
Anyway,
People
we need to wrap
arguing
up.
against me. So let's wrap up. Our thesis is, yeah, please comment if you have any ideas how to conclude this podcast, because we have no idea how to.
Okay. We
Okay.
have become really different people since all of the 2019 stuff. Since everything that we did back then when we started Teammate Dimension as it is.
Yeah.
And yet, everything changed. And yet, we are somehow still excited about VTubers now.
Yeah. It's a cycle.
It's a cycle. Well,
It's a cycle. We just keep on going. And
despite everything, we still continue.
I think we keep on repeating that over and over again. It's a cycle, really.
Just like real life, I guess.
Yeah. So in any case, let's wrap up. Omae, shimi ga aru daro?
Anything worth doing. I
Yeah.
can't really think of like a particular code. Yeah.
No. Don't think of don't think of something quotable. Let's just close it. VTuber らしく締めお願いします.
Okay. Well, I'll do my usual closing spiel then.
Yeah.
It has been a great ride with everybody. Thank you for letting me be Wataru to everybody in the audience who is watching me. And how do I say this? Oh yeah, I'll just do my regular closing spiel. I'll just say, well, that has been it for today's stream. So for today's episode of Tawagoto Café.
Your modes are showing.
Yeah. It's definitely a force of habit at this point. And that has been it for today's episode of Tawagoto Café. See you, everybody. Wait, no, that's not the audio things works.
What?
Wait, I'm trying to remember how I do my spiels.
First you remember it too much. Now you forgot it completely.
Yeah. The effects of basically being awake past midnight with a lot of like brain altering no, I can't say that. Caffeine. Caffeine is a brain altering substance.
I haven't seen you drink any caffeine. I have my caffeine over here.
I highly suspect that the latte I got earlier was not decaf.
That's fine. Anyway, closing.
Okay, closing. And that has been it for today's episode of Tawagoto Café. See you, everybody, and safe travels.
And that is also all from me as well. If you would like to have something translated, my rates are too high. Please don't. Seele deshita. Sayonara. Goodbye.
Wataru deshita.
Yeah. Yoroshiku. Please comment. Please. I'm going to push this episode hard. And